Sarah Blackwood sighed as she sorted through another box of dusty photographs in the basement archives of the Savannah Historical Society. At 28, with a PhD in historical preservation, this summer fellowship was supposed to be her big break, cataloging forgotten photographs from Georgia's past. 3 weeks in, the excitement had faded into tedium. Find anything interesting? Tom Chun, the Society's senior archivist, called from across the dimly lit room. And just more family portraits, and Sarah's voice caught as she lifted a photograph from a manila envelope labeled Unknown -1923. Her fingers trembled slightly. Tom, you need to see this. Tom approached, adjusting his glasses. The sepia-toned photograph showed a wedding party outside a white clapboard church. Bride in a flowing dress, bridesmaids with bouquets, groomsmen in dark suits. But something was wrong. The groom, Sarah whispered, pointing. He's in 2 places. The same man, tall, clean-shaven, with a distinctive cleft chin, appeared twice in the photograph. Once beside the bride, and again standing 3 people away at the end of the line. Tom frowned. Double exposure? Early photo manipulation? In 1923? In rural Georgia? Sarah shook her head. And look how perfect it is. No overlapping, no transparency. 2 identical men. The photograph bore a photographer's stamp, J. Montgomery, Brunswick, GA, and a date. June 18, 1923. Maybe twins? Tom suggested. Identical twins as the groom? Sarah turned the photograph over. In faded handwriting, Elizabeth and Thomas Caldwell wedding, St. James Church. Nothing else. I want to research this, Sarah said. Tom hesitated. Your fellowship is for cataloging, not investigation. Please. This could be significant. Sarah clutched the photograph. An early example of photographic deception, or something else entirely. Tom sighed. Fine. 1 week. Then back to cataloging. That night in her rented apartment, Sarah scanned the photograph, enlarging sections on her laptop. The men were identical. Same face, same suit, same boutonniere, same slight tilt of the head. Even the shadow beneath each fell at precisely the same angle. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Silence, then a scratchy, distant voice. Leave it alone. Who is this? The line went dead. Sarah glanced at the photograph on her screen, a chill running down her spine despite the summer heat. Outside, thunder rolled across Savannah's night sky as the first heavy drops of rain began to fall. The Brunswick County Library was nearly empty when Sarah arrived the next morning. The rain continued, drumming steadily against the windows as she settled at a microfilm reader. Brunswick Gazette Archives, 1923? The elderly librarian eyed her curiously. Yes, please. June through July. Sarah scrolled through the grainy newspaper pages. On June 20th, 1923, she found it. Wedding bells ring for Caldwell Harmon Union. Miss Elizabeth Harmon, daughter of prominent businessman Gerald Harmon, wed Mr. Thomas Caldwell of Atlanta on Monday at St. James Church. The bride was radiant in ivory silk. The article mentioned nothing unusual. Sarah continued searching, finding only a brief death notice 3 weeks later. Tragic accident, claims newlywed. Thomas Caldwell, recently wed to Elizabeth Harmon, died Thursday when his motorcar veered from Coastal Highway. Mrs. Caldwell was not in the vehicle and is in seclusion with family. Sarah sat back, rubbing her eyes. Turning to local census records, she discovered Elizabeth had never remarried, living until 1978. No children. After lunch, Sarah drove to the Brunswick County Records Office. A heavy-set clerk with suspicious eyes examined her university credentials before grudgingly providing access to property records. The Harmon house still existed, a Victorian mansion on St. Simon's Island, now converted to an upscale bed and breakfast called the Harmon Estate. Outside the records office, Sarah noticed a black sedan parked across the street, its windows tinted. When she looked again moments later, it was gone. Back at her hotel, Sarah booked a room at the Harmon Estate for the following night. As she completed the reservation, her laptop screen flickered, momentarily showing what looked like a negative image of the wedding photograph before returning to normal. She blinked, wondering if she'd imagined it. Opening her email, she found a new message with no sender, the subject line blank. The body contained only 4 words: some things stay buried. Sarah slammed her laptop closed, her heart racing. The logical part of her brain suggested a hacker, someone playing pranks. But as rain lashed against her hotel window, logic seemed increasingly fragile. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Found something. St. James's Church records showed Thomas Caldwell was buried in their cemetery. No body was recovered from crash site. Sarah texted back, "What do you mean, no body?" Tom's response came quickly. Police report states vehicle was empty when found at bottom of ravine. Blood on driver's seat. Caldwell never found. Sarah stared at the rain-streaked window, her reflection pale and ghostly against the darkness outside. Tomorrow she would visit the place where it all began. The Harmon estate loomed against the gray sky, its white columns and wraparound porch somehow both welcoming and forbidding. Spanish moss draped the ancient oaks surrounding the property, swaying gently in the coastal breeze. "Welcome to the Harmon estate," chirped the receptionist, a young woman with a practiced smile. "You're in the Rose Room, our most historic accommodation. Elizabeth Harmon's personal bedroom." Sarah's pulse quickened. "I'm actually researching the Harmon family. Elizabeth specifically." The receptionist's smile faltered slightly. "How interesting. You might want to speak with Mrs. Daniels, the owner. She's a distant Harmon relation and something of a family historian." The Rose Room was elegantly appointed with antique furniture, floral wallpaper, and a four-poster bed. Sarah set down her overnight bag and examined the photographs on the wall, mostly landscapes. But one showed the house in its prime, circa 1920s, with a family gathered on the porch. A knock startled her. A woman in her 70s stood in the doorway, straight-backed with silver hair pulled into a tight bun. "I'm Eleanor Daniels. Claire mentioned you're interested in my family." Sarah explained her research, carefully omitting the photograph's anomaly. Mrs. Daniels invited her to tea in the garden parlor, where rain pattered against a glass ceiling. "Elizabeth was my great-aunt," Mrs. Daniels said, pouring tea into delicate cups. "Her wedding was meant to unite two prominent families, but ended in tragedy." "Thomas's accident," Sarah nodded. Mrs. Daniels' hand paused mid-pour. "Yes, though some said it wasn't an accident at all." "What do you mean?" "Family rumors. Elizabeth was changed after the wedding. Before Thomas's death, she kept insisting something was wrong with him, that he wasn't the same man she'd agreed to marry." Sarah's skin prickled. "Did she elaborate?" "She told my grandmother he would disappear for hours, claiming to have been home the entire time. Said his personality had changed overnight." Mrs. Daniels sipped her tea. "After the funeral, a closed casket affair, of course, Elizabeth refused to speak of him again. Lived as a widow for 55 years. That evening, Sarah toured the house, pausing at a small library filled with family albums. With Mrs. Daniels' permission, she carefully paged through them. In one album from the 1950s, she found a newspaper clipping yellowed with age. "Local woman committed after bizarre claims." The article detailed how Elizabeth Caldwell had been briefly institutionalized after claiming her dead husband was living inside mirrors, watching her. Later in her room, Sarah couldn't sleep. Rain had given way to an oppressive humidity that made the air feel thick. At 2:17 a.m. she woke suddenly, certain she'd heard footsteps in the hallway. The antique mirror across from her bed reflected the moonlight streaming through lace curtains. For a moment, Sarah thought she saw a figure standing beside her bed, a tall man in a dark suit. She jerked upright, but the room was empty. As her racing heart slowed, Sarah noticed something on the dresser that hadn't been there before, a small, yellowed envelope. Inside was a scrap of paper with a single line of text in faded ink. "St. James Cemetery. Plot 33. Morning brought sunshine that did little to dispel Sarah's unease." She'd shown the mysterious note to Mrs. Daniels, who claimed no knowledge of it, suggesting perhaps another guest was playing a prank. James. Church was a 20-minute drive from the estate, a white wooden structure with a modest steeple and a small cemetery enclosed by a wrought iron fence. The church itself was locked, a sign indicating services were held only on Sundays. The cemetery was deserted, ancient live oaks creating pools of shadow across weathered gravestones. Sarah counted rows until she reached plot 33. "Thomas Caldwell, 1897-1923, beloved husband, may he find peace." The grave looked unremarkable, though she noted the absence of any religious symbols. As Sarah knelt to examine it closer, her phone rang. "Tom. Sarah, you need to come back to Savannah. Now." His voice was tight with urgency. "What's wrong?" "The photograph. It's changed." "What do you mean, changed?" "Just get back here." Sarah hurried back to her car, casting one last glance at the grave. A movement caught her eye, a figure standing between distant trees, a man in dark clothing. When she blinked, he was gone. The drive to Savannah was tense, summer heat making the road shimmer. Twice, Sarah thought she saw a black sedan in her rearview mirror, but it never drew close enough for her to be certain. At the Historical Society, Tom waited in the research room, looking pale. "Look," he said without preamble, placing the original photograph on the table. Sarah stared in disbelief. Now, instead of appearing twice, the groom wasn't in the picture at all. The bride stood alone, her smile strained, a space beside her where Thomas Caldwell should have been. "This isn't possible," Sarah whispered. "It gets worse." Tom opened his laptop, showing her the scan she'd sent him days earlier. In this version, the groom appeared in 3 places beside the bride at the end of the line, and now, barely visible in a window of the church, watching the wedding party from inside. "Someone's tampering with the evidence," Sarah insisted, though even as she said it, she didn't believe it. "I've had the original locked in our climate-controlled archive," Tom said. "Nobody has accessed it but me." Sarah's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Stop now or join him." She showed Tom, who immediately called campus security. While they waited, Sarah described her findings in Brunswick, including the note left in her hotel room. "I think I need to go back to St. James Cemetery," she said. "Absolutely not," Tom replied. "This is beyond academic research now. We should contact the police and tell them what? That a 100-year-old photograph is changing? That I'm getting threatening texts about a man who died in 1923? After campus security arrived, finding nothing suspicious, Sarah agreed to spend the night at Tom's apartment rather than return to her empty rental. Neither slept much, jumping at every creak in the old building. In the morning, Sarah made a decision. "I'm going back to Brunswick," she announced over coffee. "To the cemetery. There's something there, some answer we're missing." "Then I'm coming with you," Tom insisted. They arrived at St. James Cemetery by late afternoon. The summer day was clear, cicadas buzzing in the trees surrounding the grounds. Plot 33 looked exactly as Sarah had left it. "Now what?" Tom asked. Sarah wasn't sure. Acting on instinct, she placed her hand on the gravestone. The surface felt unusually warm even for a hot day. "Tom," she said slowly, "does this stone feel strange to you?" As Tom reached toward the grave, a voice called from behind them. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." They turned to find an elderly man watching them from beneath the shade of a massive oak. He leaned on a shovel, overalls stained with earth, his weathered face impassive. "You're trespassing on private property after hours," he said, though the sun was still high. Sarah approached him. "We're researchers from Savannah Historical Society. I'm studying the Caldwell-Harmon wedding of 1923. The old man's expression didn't change, but Sarah noticed his grip tighten on the shovel. "Nothing to study. Just another wedding. Just another grave." "Then why?" Tom asked, stepping forward. "Is there no body in it?" The caretaker's eyes narrowed. "Who told you that?" "Church records," Tom replied. The man spat on the ground. "Church records don't tell the whole truth." "Never have." "What's the whole truth?" Sarah asked. The caretaker studied them for a long moment. "My grandfather was caretaker here. Said they buried an empty coffin because the bride insisted. Said Thomas Caldwell wasn't dead, just gone." "Gone where?" He shrugged. "Madness, most likely. The Harmon girl went peculiar afterward. Kept coming here at night, talking to the grave like he could hear her." "Did your grandfather ever mention anything unusual about the wedding?" Sarah pulled out her phone, showing him the original scanned photograph with the duplicated groom. The old man squinted at the image, then stepped back as if burned. "Where'd you get that?" "Savannah Historical Society archives. Put it away." His voice had dropped to a harsh whisper. "Some things shouldn't be looked at too closely." "Please," Sarah pressed. "We need to understand what happened." The caretaker hesitated, then sighed deeply. "Meet me at the church maintenance shed in 1 hour. Bring no one else." He shuffled away, disappearing among the headstones. "This is how horror movies start," Tom muttered. "You don't have to come. I'm not letting you meet cryptic cemetery guy alone." They spent the hour at a nearby diner, picking at sandwiches neither wanted. When they returned, the cemetery was bathed in the golden light of approaching sunset, shadows lengthening across the graves. The maintenance shed stood at the far edge of the property, a weathered wooden structure nearly hidden by overgrown shrubs. The door creaked open as they approached. Inside, the caretaker sat on an upturned bucket, a kerosene lamp casting flickering shadows across the cramped space. Tools hung from walls, and the earthy smell of soil and fertilizer filled the air. "My name's Harlan," he said without preamble. "My family's tended this cemetery for 4 generations. He reached into his pocket, extracting a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. "My grandfather wrote this account in 1938. Never showed anyone but family. Says I should destroy it, but ... double, quotes he shrugged. "Some stories need telling, I suppose." Sarah accepted the paper with trembling fingers. The handwriting was faded but legible. "On June 18, 1923, I witnessed something that defies explanation. During the Caldwell-Harmon wedding, I saw the groom, Thomas Caldwell, in 2 places simultaneously. I told no one, believing my eyes had deceived me. 3 weeks later, when his empty vehicle was found wrecked, I helped search for his body. We found nothing but his wedding ring on the driver's seat, covered in blood. The night after the funeral, Elizabeth Caldwell came to the cemetery with a local photographer. She claimed Thomas was trying to return, that he existed in reflections. The photographer took pictures of the grave. In every one, a figure appeared, Thomas Caldwell standing behind his own headstone. May God forgive me, but I burned those photographs. All except one. Sarah looked up. The one that ended up in our archives. Harlan nodded. Grandfather said the photographer went mad within a year. Claimed Thomas Caldwell was stealing his face bit by bit. This is insane, Tom whispered. Insane or not, strange things still happen at that grave. Harlan leaned forward. Every caretaker learns to avoid Plot 33 after dark. Visitors report seeing their reflections move independently. 3 people have disappeared after visiting at sunset. The kerosene lamp flickered, shadows dancing across the walls. What happened to Thomas Caldwell? Sarah asked. Harlan's eyes reflected the lamplight. Grandfather believed he was never just one man to begin with. Back at the Harmon estate, Sarah couldn't shake the caretaker's words. Tom had returned to Savannah, promising to research the photographer J. Montgomery, while Sarah remained to investigate further. That night, unable to sleep, she wandered the silent house. Most guests were asleep. Only a night manager dozed at the front desk. Sarah found herself drawn to the library again. A leather-bound book caught her attention, unmarked, wedged between larger volumes on a bottom shelf. Inside were handwritten entries. The first dated July 1923, Elizabeth Caldwell's journal. Sarah knew she should inform Mrs. Daniels, ask permission. Instead, she took the journal to her room. The first entries detailed Elizabeth's grief and confusion. July 25th, 1923. They say Thomas is dead, yet I see him everywhere. In windows, in mirrors, in still water. He watches me, but it isn't him. Not the Thomas I knew before a wedding day. Something changed during the ceremony. I felt at the moment we said our vows, a coldness, as if something passed through me. That night he was different, his touch, his voice. When I questioned him, he grew angry in a way Thomas never would. The next morning I saw him in 2 places at once, at the breakfast table and in the garden simultaneously. When I screamed, both disappeared. Sarah read until dawn the journal describing Elizabeth's increasing paranoia. She claimed Thomas existed in the spaces between, able to step in and out of reflective surfaces. The entries grew more disturbing. August 15, 1923. I took all mirrors from the house today. Thomas appeared in my silver hairbrush. He begged me to help him return completely. Said he needs a living soul to anchor himself. I refused. His face changed then, became something inhuman for just a moment. The final entry dated September 3, 1923. I understand now. It was never Thomas. Something else came through during our wedding wearing his form. The real Thomas is trapped somewhere, calling to me weakly. I've consulted a spiritualist who says the boundary between worlds is thinnest where the deception began. I must return to St. James's Church. God forgive me for what I must do. The journal ended abruptly. Sarah closed it, watching the sunrise through her window. According to public records, Elizabeth had been committed to an asylum shortly after this date, though released within months. Sarah's phone rang. Tom. I found information on J. Montgomery, he said without greeting. He wasn't just a photographer. He wrote papers on spirit photography and liminal entities before being discredited. Claimed certain rituals could open doorways during significant life events. Like weddings, Sarah whispered. Exactly. His death certificate is strange too. Cause listed as self-inflicted injuries to the face. Sarah felt cold despite the morning warmth. Tom, I need to go back to St. James Church. The actual church, not just the cemetery. Sarah, no. This is... I found Elizabeth's journal. She believes something happened during the ceremony itself. Silence, then. I'm driving back down. Wait for me. I will. After hanging up, Sarah noticed something she'd missed before. Small key tucked into the journal's back cover. Old, iron, intricately designed. No indication of what it might open. As Sarah prepared to meet Tom, her laptop screen flickered. The wedding photograph appeared, though she hadn't opened the file. Now the groom appeared in 4 places, next to the bride, at the line's end, in the church window, and standing directly behind Sarah's reflection on the screen, his hand reaching toward her shoulder. Sarah slammed the laptop closed, heart pounding. When she cautiously opened it again, her desktop appeared normal. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It's too late. I'm already here. As if in response, the antique mirror on her wall cracked from corner to corner with a sound like breaking ice. St. James. Church looked different in daylights, smaller, less imposing. Sarah waited in her car for Tom, the journal and mysterious key on the passenger seat beside her. Her phone rang. Tom, I'm delayed. Flat tire. Says at least an hour. I'll wait, Sarah promised. But as noon approached, Sarah noticed Harlan unlocking the church doors. Impulsively, she grabbed the journal and key and approached him. Church is closed except Sundays, he said, not unkindly. Please, I need to see where the wedding took place. Harlan studied her face. Found something, didn't you? Sarah showed him the journal. He sighed, shoulders sagging. 15 minutes. I need to prepare for tomorrow's service. The church interior was cool and dim, light filtering through stained glass windows. Simple wooden pews faced a modest altar. Nothing remarkable. The wedding would have happened right there, Harlan said, pointing to the altar. Standard ceremony. Sarah approached the altar, journal in hand. Something nagged at her. A detail from Elizabeth's writings. Was there ever a room beneath the church? A crypt or cellar? Harlan's expression shuddered. Who told you that? Elizabeth's journal mentions a lower space where the exchange happened. The caretaker was silent for so long Sarah thought he wouldn't answer. There was a small crypt, he finally said, for prominent church members. Sealed up in the 1950s after ... incidents. What incidents? People claimed to see things in the baptismal font. Reflections that moved independently. Church council blamed poor drainage, sealed the crypt, replaced the font. He pointed to a modern stone basin near the altar. Sarah approached the font, noting its position. The floor beneath it was newer than the surrounding wood. Is there still access to the crypt? Harlan shook his head firmly. Sealed. For good reason. When he turned to adjust a hymnal on a nearby pew, Sarah knelt and examined the floor around the font. A seam was visible, and at its center, a small, almost imperceptible keyhole. Her fingers closed around Elizabeth's key in her pocket. I need to use the restroom, she said suddenly. Harlan pointed to a door near the entrance. Make it quick. In the restroom, Sarah texted Tom. Found something. Possible sealed crypt under church. Have key that might open it. His response was immediate. Do not open anything. Wait for me. 20 minutes away. Sarah returned to the main church. Harlan was in the back, arranging flowers for Sunday service. Moving quietly, she knelt by the baptismal font and inserted the key into the floor's hidden keyhole. It fit perfectly. She hesitated, Tom's warning fresh in her mind. But the historian in her, the part that needed answers, turned the key. A soft click, then nothing. Sarah pushed against the floor section, which gave slightly. Heart racing, she glanced back. Harlan was still occupied. Using both hands, she pushed harder. The section moved, revealing stone steps descending into darkness. Sarah activated her phone's flashlight and peered down. The air that rose was stale but dry. Making a split-second decision she would later question, she slipped through the opening and descended, carefully sliding the floor section mostly closed above her. The crypt was small, maybe 15 feet square, with a low stone ceiling. Her flashlight revealed several stone sarcophagi, their lids carved with names now faded with time. Against one wall stood a simple stone altar and upon it a silver basin. Sarah approached the basin. Unlike the rest of the crypt, it showed no dust or signs of age. The silver gleamed as if recently polished. Suddenly her phone died, screen going black, flashlight extinguished. Darkness engulfed her. Sarah fumbled in her pocket for matches she'd taken from the hotel. Striking one, she held it toward the altar. The flame's reflection in the silver basin showed not her face, but Thomas Caldwell's, smiling. The match went out. In the darkness, Sarah heard liquid softly lapping against metal, though the basin had been empty. Her second match revealed the basin now full of clear water, or something like water. Its surface rippled, though there was no breeze. In the water's reflection, she saw not the crypt's ceiling, but a church interior, St. James. But different. Older. A wedding in progress. She recognized Elizabeth in her bridal gown. The groom turned, looking directly at Sarah through the reflection, his eyes meeting hers across 100 years. He smiled, and reached toward the water's surface. Sarah stumbled backward as the match burned her fingers. In the sudden darkness, she heard a splash, as if something large had broken the water's surface. And then, a whisper close to her ear. "Thank you for opening the door." Sarah scrambled backward in the darkness, colliding with a stone sarcophagus. Her breath came in panicked gasps, the blackness absolute. Water splashed again, the sound of someone moving through liquid approaching. Desperately, she fumbled for another match, striking it against the stone floor. The flare of light revealed the crypt as before, but now wet footprints led from the basin toward her. No one was visible, but water continued to drip, 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 as if from soaked clothing. "Who's there?" Sarah's voice echoed. The match flickered, casting unstable light. A shadow moved where no one stood. The temperature plummeted, her breath suddenly visible in the cold. "Thomas?" A whisper, seemingly from everywhere. "Not anymore." The match died. In the darkness, cold fingers brushed her cheek. Sarah screamed, lunging for where she remembered the stairs to be. Finding them, she scrambled upward, pushing against the floor section above. It didn't move. "Let me out!" she cried, pounding. Silence answered, then footsteps on the floor above, multiple sets, voices. The floor section shifted, light streaming down. Tom and Harlan stared down at her, faces shocked. "Sarah! What the hell?" Tom reached down, helping her out. She was shaking uncontrollably, clothes dry but chilled to the bone. "There's something down there." In the basin, Harlan's face had gone ashen. "You used the key." Behind them, the church door burst open. Mrs. Daniel stood there, expression furious. "You fools. You've opened it." Tom helped Sarah to a pew while Mrs. Daniels paced before the altar, Harlan watching nervously. "That crypt was sealed for a reason," Mrs. Daniels snapped. "The basin should have been destroyed, but the church council couldn't agree. So they compromised, sealed it away, kept the key hidden." "You knew about this?" Sarah asked, still shivering. "I am Elizabeth's great-niece." "Of course I knew, Mrs." Daniel's anger faltered, showing fear beneath. "Family stories passed down." Elizabeth tried to warn everyone. "About what exactly?" Tom asked. "She called it a thief of faces. Said it came through during her wedding, drawn by the ritual's power, the promises made. It took Thomas first, created duplicates to strengthen itself. When she discovered the truth, it tried to take her too." "The journal mentioned a spiritualist," Sarah said. Mrs. Daniels nodded grimly. "Who helped her trap it in the basin using an old ritual. The same basin used in baptisms, weddings, all church ceremonies. A symbol of transformation, powerful enough to contain it barely." Sarah described what she'd seen in the crypt. Mrs. Daniels listened intently, expression growing darker. "It's been waiting, gathering strength. Now you've given it a way out." "I don't understand," Tom said. "What exactly are we dealing with?" Before Mrs. Daniels could answer, the lights flickered. The baptismal font on the altar began to overflow, water spilling across the floor despite no visible source. "It's coming," Harlan whispered. In the church's stained glass windows, their reflections moved independently, turning to watch them. The water continued spreading, forming a large puddle before the altar. "We need to leave," Mrs. Daniels ordered. "Now." They moved toward the door, but stopped as the puddle's surface rippled. A hand emerged from the water, a human hand followed by an arm, shoulder, then a head. Thomas Caldwell rose from the impossible depth of an inch of water, his form dripping but rapidly drying. He looked exactly as he did in the wedding photograph, handsome, well-dressed, smiling pleasantly. "Elizabeth?" he called, gaze fixing on Mrs. Daniels. "No, you're not her." His eyes shifted to Sarah. "But you opened my door. That makes you mine." Harlan moved forward, brandishing a cross from the altar. "Back to your prison, demon." Thomas's smile widened unnaturally. "I've had a century to plan my return. Your symbols mean nothing." With shocking speed, he grabbed Harlan's wrist. The old man screamed as his skin bubbled where Thomas touched him. Tom shoved Sarah toward the door. "Run!" They fled into the cemetery, the summer day incongruously bright and peaceful. Behind them, Harlan's screams abruptly ceased. "My car!" Tom gasped, pointing. They piled in, Tom fumbling with the keys. As the engine started, Sarah looked back at the church. Thomas Caldwell stood in the doorway, smoothing his jacket. But his face was changing, features shifting like wax near flame, briefly showing Harlan's weathered visage beneath before settling back into Thomas's form. "What is that thing?" Tom asked, accelerating away. "Elizabeth's journal called it a mimic," Sarah said. "It exists in reflections but needs human hosts to fully enter our world." "Where are we going?" Tom asked. Mrs. Daniels in the backseat spoke with resigned authority. "The Harmon estate." Elizabeth left contingencies. The Harmon estate was quiet when they arrived. Afternoon sun casting long shadows across the lawn. Mrs. Daniels led them directly to the library, locking the door behind them. "We don't have much time," she said, moving to a bookshelf and removing volumes to reveal a small wall safe. "It can track Sarah now. It's tasted her essence in the crypt." "What does that mean?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Mrs. Daniels didn't answer, focusing on the safe's combination lock. Inside was a leather portfolio which she placed on a reading table. Elizabeth spent years researching what she'd encountered. After her release from the asylum, she traveled Europe consulting occultists and scholars. Mrs. Daniels carefully opened the portfolio. She called it a doppelganger, but it's older than that concept. A parasite that lives in reflections, watching our world, waiting for chances to cross over. The portfolio contained hand-drawn diagrams. newspaper clippings about mysterious disappearances, and notes in Elizabeth's handwriting. One page showed the church's floor plan with the crypt marked in red ink. Strong emotions and ritual moments create what Elizabeth called thin places where it can reach through, Mrs. Daniels continued. Weddings are particularly vulnerable, promises of two becoming one. How did it duplicate Thomas in the photograph? Tom asked. It doesn't just mimic appearances. It can splinter itself, create multiple instances, though this weakens it temporarily. That's when Elizabeth trapped part of it in the basin. Sarah studied the materials. If part was trapped, what happened to the rest? And to the real Thomas? Mrs. Daniels looked pained. The real Thomas was likely consumed during their wedding night. As for the rest, she gestured to a news clipping about the photographer's suicide. It continued hunting those connected to the incident. How do we stop it? Tom asked. Elizabeth believed it could be forced back through a reflection and trapped again. But the ritual requires ... Mrs. Daniels hesitated. Requires what? Sarah pressed. Bait. Someone it's connected to. You, now. Sarah felt sick. Outside, clouds had gathered, dimming the afternoon light in the library's windows. Reflections appeared despite the lack of sunlight to cast them indistinct figures watching from the glass. Tom moved to Sarah protectively. There has to be another way. We have until sunset, Mrs. Daniels said grimly. After dark, its power grows. A soft knock at the library door made them all start. Mrs. Daniels raised a finger to her lips, moving quietly to the door's small viewing window. She jerked back immediately. It's here, Mrs. Daniels? Called a perfect imitation of Harlan's voice. Let me in, please. I'm injured. They remained silent, gathering Elizabeth's materials. Sarah? Now it was Tom's voice, though Tom stood right beside her. Help me, Sarah. It's taking my face. The doorknob rattled, then stopped. Silence. Water began seeping under the door, a widening puddle on the hardwood floor. The back exit, Mrs. Daniels whispered, leading them to a concealed door behind a tapestry. They slipped into a narrow service corridor just as the library door splintered open behind them. Water rushed into the room as they fled through the passage, emerging in the kitchen. The basement, Mrs. Daniels directed, leading them down another staircase. Elizabeth prepared a place. The basement was unexpectedly modern concrete floors, fluorescent lighting, dehumidifiers humming in corners. Mrs. Daniels moved to what appeared to be a storage room, unlocking it with a key from her pocket. Inside, the space transformed completely. Mirrors covered every wall, ceiling to floor, angled to reflect each other infinitely. In the center, a circle was drawn in what looked like silver paint, symbols inscribed around its circumference. Elizabeth's trap, Mrs. Daniels explained, placing the portfolio on a small table just outside the circle. She spent decades perfecting it, though she never had to use it. What do we do? Sarah asked, eyeing the disorienting reflections. According to her notes, the entity must be lured into the circle and then trapped between reflections. The symbols disrupt its ability to move between them. Tom examined the setup. How exactly do we lure it? Blood of the connected, Mrs. Daniels said quietly, removing a silver letter opener from the portfolio. Sarah's blood specifically. Sarah swallowed hard but nodded. What then? We shatter the primary mirror at the exact moment it manifests fully. Mrs. Daniels pointed to one larger mirror mounted opposite the door, trapping it between reflections, unable to fully materialize. From upstairs came the sound of breaking glass, followed by water rushing down staircases, seeping under doors. It's found us, Tom said. Mrs. Daniels handed Sarah the letter opener. A few drops in the center of the circle. Nothing more. Sarah's hand shook as she pricked her finger, allowing blood to drip onto the concrete floor within the silver circle. The effect was immediate. In every mirror, ripples appeared as if the glass had become liquid. Reflections distorted, showing not the room they stood in, but the church, the cemetery, the crypt below St. James. And in each reflection, Thomas Caldwell watched them, his form multiplying across dozens of mirrors. Each version slightly different, some in wedding attire, some in modern clothes, some only partially human, features distorted and fluid. It's working, Mrs. Daniels whispered. She handed Tom a hammer. When I say now shatter the primary mirror, water poured faster down the stairs outside the room, pooling at the doorway but strangely not entering. In the reflections, Thomas approached, moving closer in each mirror until his hands pressed against the glass from the inside. His mouth moved, though they heard nothing. He's asking permission to enter, Mrs. Daniels said. It needs consent, an invitation. What do we do? Tom asked. Sarah must invite it, but only after it's fully in the primary mirror. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. How will I know? When all reflections converge into one. The water outside the door rose higher, pressing against invisible barriers. The temperature dropped rapidly, breath misting before their faces. In the mirrors, the multiple Thomases began to merge, flowing together like mercury, forms bleeding into one another. Some wore Harlan's face, others had features Sarah didn't recognize, previous victims, she realized with horror. Mrs. Daniels gripped Sarah's arm. Almost. Wait for my signal. The reflections continued merging, coalescing toward the primary mirror. The water outside rose to knee-height, freezing into fractured ice against the doorway. Now, Mrs. Daniels whispered, invite it. Sarah steeled herself. Thomas Caldwell, I invite you through. The primary mirror's surface rippled violently. A hand emerged, three-dimensional and solid, reaching toward Sarah. Behind it, Thomas's face pressed forward, features struggling to maintain humanoid form. Now, Mrs. Daniels shouted. Tom swung the hammer, striking the mirror. Instead of shattering, the glass became liquid, Thomas's form surging forward faster. Again, Mrs. Daniels cried. Tom struck repeatedly. On the third blow, cracks spiderwebbed across the surface, temporarily halting Thomas's emergence. His expression contorted in rage. One more, Mrs. Daniels urged. As Tom raised the hammer for a final blow, water exploded through the doorway, knocking him sideways. The hammer skittered across the floor. Thomas's arm was now fully emerged, reaching for Sarah. The silver circle sparked where his fingers crossed its boundary, causing him to recoil slightly. Mrs. Daniels lunged for the hammer but slipped on the wet floor. Sarah watched in horror as Thomas's other arm emerged, his shoulders following. Acting on instinct, Sarah grabbed the letter opener and slashed it across her palm. Blood welled immediately. For Elizabeth, she whispered, pressing her bleeding hand against Thomas's partially materialized face. The effect was catastrophic. Thomas shrieked a sound like breaking glass multiplied 100-fold. His form rippled, features melting, revealing countless faces beneath, all screaming in unison. Sarah grabbed the fallen hammer with her other hand and struck the mirror with all her strength. The glass shattered. Thomas's form seemed to implode, sucked backward into the fragmented reflections, pieces of him caught in each shard, unable to reunite. The other mirrors cracked simultaneously, trapping fragments of his essence in dozens of disconnected reflections. The water receded instantly, evaporating into steam that fogged the broken mirrors. For a moment, in each foggy shard, a different face appeared, men and women spanning decades. Their expressions one of relief before fading to emptiness. Then silence. Mrs. Daniels helped Sarah to her feet, wrapping her bleeding hand in a handkerchief. You did it. Elizabeth would be proud. Tom staggered up, soaked but unharmed. Is it over? Mrs. Daniels surveyed the shattered mirrors. Not destroyed, but contained. Fragmented beyond repair. We need to destroy every piece, Sarah said firmly. Completely. Yes, Mrs. Daniels agreed. Elizabeth's notes suggested extreme heat. Fire, or foundry. Later, as emergency services treated Sarah's hand kitchen accident, they'd claimed. She watched Mrs. Daniels directing workers to carefully collect every glass fragment in specialized containers. We'll have them properly disposed of, the older woman assured her. I know people who can ensure they're melted down completely. Tom sat beside Sarah on the ambulance's tailgate. So that's it? Academic mystery solved? Sarah smiled weakly. Solved, but unpublishable. Historical researcher battles face-stealing entity isn't exactly peer-reviewed. Material. What will you tell the Historical Society? Sarah considered this. That the photograph showed evidence of early manipulation techniques. Technically true. As twilight fell, Sarah glanced at the ambulance's side mirror and for just an instant, thought she saw a familiar face watching her from within its depths. Then she blinked and saw only her own tired reflection. 3 months later, Sarah sat in her new office at the Brunswick County Historical Society, organizing materials for her exhibit, Photographic Anomalies of the Early 20th Century. Her fellowship had led to a permanent position, her research bringing renewed interest to the Society's archives. The wedding photograph, the original with 2 grooms, was now safely stored in a lead-lined box, sealed and marked damaged beyond repair. Do not open. Mrs. Daniels had pulled strings to have it transferred permanently to Brunswick, where Sarah could ensure it remained secured. Tom visited occasionally from Savannah, their shared experience having formed a bond that was cautiously developing into something more. Sarah's phone rang. Mrs. Daniels. Just checking in, the older woman said. Any disturbances? None, Sarah confirmed. This had become their routine check-in, both vigilant for signs the entity might be attempting to reconstitute itself. Excellent. The final fragments were disposed of yesterday. Industrial furnace, temperatures exceeding 2,500 degrees. Good. Sarah felt relief wash over her. I've been wondering, why did my blood have such a strong effect on it? Mrs. Daniels was silent a moment. Elizabeth's journal suggested the entity can be repelled by the essence of those who recognize its true nature. Few ever do. After they hung up, Sarah turned to the stack of newly arrived photographs requiring cataloging. She'd developed protocols for handling potentially problematic images, gloves, indirect viewing, immediate quarantine of any showing unexplained anomalies. The final envelope in the stack was weathered, marked simply Montgomery Estate donation. Inside was a single photograph, a family portrait from the 1930s. Unremarkable except for a note on the back. Final work of J. Montgomery before death. Sarah examined it carefully through the protective sleeve. A mother, father, 3 children standing before a farmhouse. Nothing unusual. Then she noticed in the farmhouse window, barely visible, a face watching. Not one of the family members, but someone else. Sarah immediately sealed the photograph in a containment envelope. Protocol demanded she report it to Mrs. Daniels immediately. Her hand hovered over her phone. In the window reflection of her office, her own face looked back at her, expression troubled. But was it really her face? Something about the eyes seemed different, older. She blinked, and her reflection did the same, returning to normal. Outside, a storm was gathering. Rain began to patter against the window glass, creating ripples that distorted her reflection once more. Sarah reached for her phone and dialed Mrs. Daniels' number. Some histories, she had learned, were better left buried, but others needed guardians to ensure they remained that way. In the window, rain continued to create patterns like fingers pressing against glass, seeking entrance. Sarah turned away, focusing on the call. Behind her, her reflection remained, watching her with eyes that were not her own.